Hi guys, it's time for our proportion and percents workout number 7. So let's get started and see what our problem is for today. It says Theo filled up his tank and then drove 301 miles. When he filled up his tank, it took 14 gallons. How many miles per gallon is Theo averaging? So we know he drove 300 miles on 14 gallons, and that was filling up his tank. Okay. So, using that information, Ted thought it took 14 gallons times the rate, the mileage rate, to go 301 miles. So, 14 times some number equals 301. Fill in the ratio table to show a way that Ted might have solved the problem. So, since he's taking the multiplication route and not the equivalent ratios, right? So, we are trying to turn this 14 into 301. Once we do that, the number that is above, right here where the question mark is, above 301 is our rate. So that's how we will get our rate for this one. So I'm trying to get all the way to 300. I'm starting at 14. And so right off the bat, I'm going to multiply both the 1 and the 14 by 10. And that'll give me 10 over 140. Still trying to get to 300. And so I'm going to double again. And I did 20. And doubling this, 40 is 80 and 100 is 200. So that's 280. So now I'm at 280. Still not as far as I would like to go, but I think if I added 14 and 280, so if I added those, so we're just going to add those two columns, that gives me 294. So I'm getting close. And then 1 plus 20 gives me 21. Now, I need to know how far away from my target am I at 294. So I'm just going to count up. So at 295, 296, 297, 298, 299, 300, 301. I just counted out 7. Okay. So that means I have to add 7 here so that I can add 294 and 7 to hit my target of 301. Okay, so I've hit that target here. So 7 is half of 14. So I need to take half of 1. So half of 1 is 0.5. We're going to add these two because we added the columns, added the row below. So we're going to add these columns. 21 and 0.5 together give me 21.5. And the 301 is here. So our rate is 21.5. So Theo thinks that we're getting 21.5 miles a gallon. That's really good gas mileage, by the way. Well, I don't know. It's not great. It's not awful, though. All right. So let's see what Gabriella did, and let's follow Gabriella's thinking, and let's make sure that Gabriella also got 21.5. She used the equivalent ratio method, which is the method that I usually prefer when I work with y'all guys. Okay, you guys. So Gabriella thought, that's 14 gallons for 301 miles. I'll use equivalent ratios. Okay. And so that means we are trying to get down our gallons to 1, a unit of 1 for our unit rate. And this number above the 1 should be 21.5. Okay. So she started with 31 and 14, and we're headed to 1. Okay. So while this one I was multiplying to make it larger because my target was 301, this one we're actually going to be trying to make this number smaller. Okay. When playing around with these numbers, and I usually always, when I get a number like 301 and 14, well, 14 is the factors of 14 are 2 and 7 and 1 and 14. And so knowing that, I went around and played with 7, and I quickly found out that if I divided 14 by 7, I got 2. And if I divided 301 by 7, I got 43. And so that 301 is kind of, intimidating because we think, oh, that's going to be a lot of, but I'm always looking for the pattern. And usually, especially on the STAR test, they give you numbers that have patterns. Okay. So you will, if you get these numbers, check to see if they are factors of each other, if that makes sense. And in fact, I could have divided them both by 14 because 14 also fits into 301, but not nice and evenly. So I'm already at 2. So I'm just taking half again, and I'm already at my target of 1. So I've hit the target here. So I'm looking for my number here. Well, I took half of 2, so I need to take half of 43. Well, half of 40 is 20, and half of 3 is 1.5. And there's our rate, 21.5 miles per gallon. If you were writing the ratio, you would have written a ratio like so. So really, in reality, what I really did here was I just reduced. And I reduced to 43 over 2 because that made my math simpler. In fact, it made it so simple that I was able to divide 43 by 2 in my head. And that's what you want to do. We want to work smarter. All right. All right. Let's see what number 3 says. Number 3 says, how many gallons does Theo need to drive 602 miles and 75.25 miles? So we just did a rate of 301 to 14. So I'm going to do that same rate here, right? So this is going to be miles and this is going to be gallons. I'm going to use my rate they gave me, which is 301 miles to 14 gallons. I hope you can see a relationship between 602 and 301. And in fact, all they did was double it. If I doubled 301, I would get 602. Okay. So if I doubled 14, I would get 28. So it takes 28 gallons to go 602 miles. Easy peasy, right? That was an easy one. Let's look. I'm going to grab the red pen. And now let's tackle the 75.25. Knowing that, so I'm here and I need to get 301 down to 75.25. So I started, and we're just going to start cutting it, right? Because I need to get this 301 down to 75.25. Okay. So let's cut them in half. So let's just cut it in half. And that means 7 miles. Half of 300 is 150, and half of 1 is 0.5. So that gives me 150.5. Remember, I'm headed to 75.25, and I have 150. Well, guys, hopefully you know that if I had $1.50, right? 75 cents is half of $1.50, right? So that gives me half there. And if I take half of my 50 cents, I would be left with 0.25 or a quarter. So 75.25 is half of 150.5. So now I've hit my target of 75.25, and I want to take half of the number that corresponds with 150.5. So that's the number underneath. And half of 7 is 3.5. So it only takes me 3.5 gallons. So I'm hoping what you see here is by knowing other answers, I'm able to solve more efficiently, right? So when I know other answers, it helps me solve. Okay, so sometimes we are so fixated on getting straight to the answer that we ignore the numbers and the patterns that we see along the way that actually make it easier to get to our answer. All right, if you're working on your own, I want you to do number 4 on your own. So pause the tape or pause the video and start working. If you're in class, have your teacher pause the video, and then we're going to do this one really quickly. All righty, I hope you were able to solve in 2 steps because I was able to solve in 2 steps, but if you didn't, that's okay too. 301 over 14 is my given ratio. My target is 7. I know the pattern between there. And in fact, we had already answered that question up here. And so we can drive 150.5 miles with 7 gallons of gas. Good job today, guys. And I'm hoping that these ratio tables are making more sense to you. So maybe when you learned them originally earlier in the year, proportional reasoning or writing proportions was confusing. But hopefully the more that you practice with them, and especially practicing addition and subtraction and multiplication and division, hopefully now they're making more sense to you. And so our answer is 150.5. And really, anytime you're taking a test and you're given 3 numbers, you're usually looking for the 4th number, and a proportion is usually the way to go.